Welcome back to another Force with Friends podcast. This is Will from the Padawan Pops YouTube channel. Now, today, a little bit different. Kevin was busy, so Force with Friends is just going to be the Force with Will today. But I consider my viewers my friends, so we're hopping into our final What If series of the three that we've done. And this is going to be a What If for the Sequel Trilogy. So I'm really proud of the audience because I put the What If out there on my community tab and I said, give me the what ifs for the sequels, but be nice. And for the most part, everyone was nice. We only got like one sarcastic remark, which was awesome. I was expecting a lot more of those. So we have some very good questions today. Let's dive in. So our first question is from Pioneer Guy 714, and he says, "What if Kylo Ren went back with Han Solo in The Force Awakens?" I think that's an excellent question. So first of all, The Force Awakens for me is one of my favorite Star Wars viewing experiences in theater. So I had last seen Revenge of the Sith in theater. It was 10 years before. So it had been 10 years since I had seen a Star Wars movie. I was in elementary school, middle school when episode 3 came out. So it had been a while. I was an adult by the time The Force Awakens came out. And it was a great experience. I was with friends. Star Wars was on the big screen. It was nostalgic. The Force Awakens kind of went that way anyways, right? Like they played it kind of safe and just pulled a lot of the themes from A New Hope into that movie. That's where some of the criticisms come from, obviously. But that ending when Han Solo goes out on that bridge with Kylo Ren, everyone knew what was going to happen there. I mean, as soon as he yells Ben and he goes out there, we're all like, oh no, Han, don't do it. But he did. But what if he didn't? What if Han goes out there and Kylo Ren's looking for help and he actually wants the help? He wants to go back with Han, and he does. The movie changes a lot, obviously, like Han Solo doesn't die. So that's one right there. We still get Han Solo. Now, Harrison Ford would never go for that. He had wanted Han Solo dead for like 40 years. But it's interesting for the Resistance if this happens. So presumably they get off Starkiller Base. They get off more quickly because there's not a duel at the end with Rey and Kylo Ren and Finn. So they all get off, assuming they still blow the Starkiller Base up as well. But then what do you do come episode 8? I mean, the Republic is still blown up, right? Like it doesn't exist because Starkiller Base got the New Republic, so it doesn't really get you ahead there. So I think in the long term, yes, you have Kylo Ren with the good guys. So you've got Ben Solo back. You've still got Han Solo. But what actually happens with the Resistance? Because there's still Snoke. Presumably the Emperor is still behind it, we learn. I mean, I guess Rey and Kylo Ren, you have 2 Force users, which is good. And then I suppose you could pull Luke back in, knowing that Ben Solo has been redeemed by his dad. So that's a cool thing. I guess you get Luke back in the fight sooner. But let's say you do get Luke back in the fight. You've got Luke, Kylo Ren, and Rey against the entire First Order with all of their resources. I'm still not convinced that things go great for the Resistance. I mean, they're still outgunned, outmanned, all the things in the Hamilton song. If you've seen Hamilton, they don't have it. So what do? I still think it takes them eventually getting to Exegol and taking out the Emperor. So it's interesting. For sure, you get to see all of our trilogy characters, original trilogy characters, back together again. So that's a plus. But as far as like how the fight shakes out with the First Order and the Resistance, I don't know if it makes that big of a difference. Like, they just replaced Kylo Ren and Snoke's still doing his thing. Snoke never dies if Kylo Ren goes, with the good guys because he doesn't get caught off guard. So, yes, it's cool, but does it change things? I'm not sure. It's a great question, though. I think it's fun to think through that. So next up, we have some questions from Dark Vortex, apologies, Dark Vortex 2410, and I've got this list of questions pulled up here. Quite a few good ones here, so let's run through. I think we're going to do all 4 of these questions from Dark Vortex. They're all pretty good. So, what if Rey turned to the dark side, but Kylo Ren turned to the light side? That's actually a story I really would have liked to have seen. So, what if somehow Rey gets corrupted in all of this? She goes to her Palpatine nature or whatever because she's like a daughter of a Palpatine clone. So she's got that darkness or whatever that they tried to throw in episode 9. You know, I think it would be a much more compelling story. So, okay, maybe we play it back on the last question. Maybe Kylo Ren goes to the light side and goes back with Han, but then maybe something happens with Rey and she goes dark, and so then the First Order has another evil Force user. I think that's very cool. I think if you play this trilogy up, like maybe this happens in the middle movie. So the Last Jedi of this trilogy, Rey turns dark and Kylo Ren goes to the light side, and then the final movie resolves that tension somehow. So maybe Kylo Ren redeems Rey or something at the end, but maybe it's still as his sacrifice. I think that would be interesting for sure. I think if you're going to play up on the whole Rey being a Palpatine thing, maybe it would have been cool to have seen her kind of dip more into that side of her story than just the Force lightning with Chewie on that whatever planet that was on, Pasana. A lot more compelling of a story, I think, if you go that route for sure. So that's a good question. Next question from Dark Vortex. What if Finn was a Jedi? Man, I wish that would have happened. They did John Boyega wrong in this trilogy, like every which way. A lot of promise in The Force Awakens. We've got him on the movie covers, like he's going to be this Jedi that's got the lightsaber and everything, and he's even using the lightsaber in the movie. And then by the time we get to The Last Jedi, he's chasing somebody at a casino and running around with Rose Tico. So, I mean, he's said his issues with the trilogy. So, I mean, I can leave it up to him to explain things. But yeah, I think, especially since we learned Finn is Force sensitive by the end of episode 9, that's just a missed opportunity. I mean, if Finn was a Jedi and we have Finn and Rey going through this battle, I think that'd be very cool. I do think probably in the Rey movie, if that movie ever actually happens, I do think we probably follow up a little bit on that Finn is a Jedi or in training or something along those lines. I think we pick that back up if John Boyega actually agrees to ever come back. They all say they're never coming back, but when the dollars and cents make sense, they always come back. So I think this is a story we may actually pick up again. Now, this next question from Dark Vortex, this is one that a lot of people would enjoy. What if Luke Skywalker never disappeared? Again, kind of going back to that Han Solo, what if he lived? It does make you wonder what difference it would make if his Jedi Temple is destroyed, Kylo Ren's with the First Order, they're outmatched. I mean, I guess it would be better because he would still be with the New Republic, so maybe they get ahead of the thing before Starkiller Base happens. So actually, I take that back. If Luke doesn't disappear, we probably never get to this point that we get to in the sequels. I think in some capacity, maybe Leia continues her Force training or something, her Jedi training with Luke. For sure, Han maybe gets back in the fight because Luke's in the fight. I think Luke Skywalker, like being this rallying call for the galaxy against the First Order, that probably takes place since he is Luke Skywalker, a legend, is what he says in The Last Jedi. So actually, yeah, I think things do change if Luke doesn't go off into hiding. I think the First Order maybe never gets to that pinnacle they get to, but it's still the Emperor behind it all. That's the issue with all of the sequel trilogy, in my opinion, is like you sloppily throw the Emperor in at the end of it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Not that it's bad that the Emperor came back, it's bad how he came back, like how they pulled it off. So, yeah, somehow they still got to get to Palpatine in this form of canon, but I don't know that we get to the Star Killer base point, if that makes sense. If Luke doesn't go away, I think the fight certainly doesn't last the 10 or whatever years it did from Kylo Ren leaving to when we pick up in the sequel trilogy. I think that's a little bit quicker of a burn there instead of it taking that long. And last question here from Dark Vortex. And now this one, my gosh, if this happened. What if Anakin Skywalker's Force Ghost talked to Kylo Ren? Well, problem solved. Like, he's worshiping a Darth Vader helmet, and the Emperor is like talking in his head, apparently, through this mask we learn in episode 9. So if Anakin Skywalker's Force Ghost just shows up and is like, hey kid, you're an idiot, like, you're missing this whole point. It does make me wonder though, like, why did Luke never explain this to him, or why did Leia never explain this to him? Like, if you've got the chosen one who fell to the dark side and then was eventually redeemed, I think it would be a good cautionary tale for all of these young Jedi. Like, hey, you think you're great, but the best Jedi ever also turned into Darth Vader and turned into like the greatest villain ever. So I think maybe that cautionary tale would have been a good one for Luke to tell the younglings or the apprentices. At the same time, Anakin himself could have showed up and explained it. So, like, if you read Shadows of the Sith, it's a great book based in the sequel trilogy canon. I really enjoyed the book. It makes 7 and 9 a little bit better. Doesn't do anything for 8 for me, but it adds to that story. And Anakin's Force Ghost shows up in that book, so I won't spoil a lot of it, but he is active in there. So yeah, it would make a lot of sense if Anakin's Force Ghost, maybe Obi-Wan's Force Ghost, Yoda's Force Ghost, Qui-Gon's Force Ghost, any of these Force Ghosts show up and just kind of set everybody straight. Yeah, that would have made so much sense if that would have happened. Now, again, you can throw this into any Star Wars and just be like, well, if Qui-Gon's Force Ghost had shown up to Obi-Wan sooner on Tatooine, or, you know, you can go down the line, right? Like, you can see where this would be an issue. You could go in Ahsoka and say, like, oh, if Anakin's Force Ghost or Obi-Wan's Force Ghost or Yoda's or whoever, then they would have known Thrawn. Like, that's a plot hole. Force Ghost can be a plot hole since they know everything. So they can only show up when the person they're showing up to needs them and is ready, I would say, is probably the best way to explain that. So, yes, it would have mitigated a lot of the damages, but you could throw that into a lot of Star Wars and be like, well, if a Force Ghost had just told them, yada, yada, yada. So, again, that could turn into a big plot hole. So, as much as I would have loved to have seen Hayden Christensen like actually show up as a Force Ghost versus just speak to Rey, I think that would have been such a cool scene, especially if this whole trilogy is the Skywalker saga. Like, it would be good to see the patriarch of the Skywalker family there. Big missed opportunity. But, again, I'm actually okay with him choosing not to do this, just for the sake of, well, a Force Ghost could solve any problem. So I kind of get why they didn't do that. Now, this next set of questions is from Giorgio, and this is on YouTube. Some pretty good questions. They dropped 5, so I think we can run through, for sure, all of these here. These are pretty good. A few will be pretty quick. So, one, what if Palpatine stayed dead, or at least have the plot of the third movie be about preventing his return? So, yes, I'm okay with Palpatine coming back as a clone or whatever, because that was his thing, right? Cheating death. So, again, fits right in. Does it fit right in where it's pegged in, at the finish line? Debatable. I don't think episode 9 landed the plane. It's my least favorite of 1 through 9. I like it better than Solo, but I think the way you utilize Palpatine coming back, it's not great. It's as if we have, all these Marvel movies and you build up this whole story past Thanos, and then all of a sudden, like, well, we killed off all the other bad guys, so let's bring Thanos back. It's kind of lazy if you do it that way. So, but if Palpatine did stay dead, I think, one, you either don't kill off Snoke, which, whatever, Ryan Johnson didn't do JJ a favor going back into 9. But either one, you keep Snoke as the bad guy, which I think is interesting. I probably would have preferred that. Or two, which was actually going to be the plan for episode 9. If you go read Duel of the Fates, I believe is what it was called. You can find that script online. That's legitimate. Kylo Ren was going to be the bad guy. He was going to stay bad. He wasn't going to turn good. He was going to be the supreme leader, and he was the enemy they were fighting. Very cool. Big fan of that. Would have liked it had that happened. But it didn't happen. Now you go here, the other part of the question, or at least have the plot of episode 9 be about preventing Palpatine's return. Kind of was, but I guess at the same time it was more about just finding him, I guess. So they weren't really preventing, they were trying to prevent him from destroying the galaxy, essentially. So yeah, maybe they get word that, like, hey, if this clone thing happens, Palpatine could come back. So maybe they go and they destroy a cloning facility or something, and they have to fight through all these other clones. And maybe that would be a cool thing. Like, if we knew it was a clone versus actually Palpatine. Because in the movie, they don't explain that it's his essence in this clone body. They're just like, oh, somehow Palpatine returned. So, again, not a big fan of that with how they did it. But again, if he had stayed dead, yeah, it's either Kylo Ren or it's Snoke. Or if, like, Rey falls to the dark side, then there's that plot twist as well. Next question, what if Finn and Poe stayed together and found Rey or met Rey? I'm assuming that being on Jakku. Couldn't think of the planet there for a minute. I'm assuming that means Finn and Poe stay together on Jakku and find Rey, maybe? So if that's the case, I guess they find her and they get away to the Resistance without having to find Han Solo and get kind of looped into all that. Now, I do think all that is pretty fun to watch in The Force Awakens, where they find Han Solo and you get the whole Chewie, we're home, and you end up on Takodana with Maz, and you go from there. Like, I like The Force Awakens. It's a fun movie. It's not super original, but it's a fun movie. And so I think you lose a lot of that, but you get Force-sensitive Rey to the Resistance quicker. You don't get Han Solo back, though, so I'm not sure really where that mixes in, I guess. But also, Rey, or backtrack, Leia knew who Rey was. If you go by canon and Rise of Skywalker, Leia knew. So what does she do with Rey showing up there? I don't know. Maybe it's the same. Interesting, though. I think you just, if they stay together, it just kind of cuts the Han Solo leg of this story out. Next question, and it's a logical one. What if the New Republic played a bigger role in the trilogy? That would be awesome. That would make so much sense. The New Republic is almost just used in like a sentence. They're like, oh no, they blew up the New Republic. That's probably more than what they actually said. I think they actually say, it was the New Republic. It was the First Order. Something like that. Finn says it. And then I guess, what's his name? Hux has that speech. And that's like it for the New Republic. So then any New Republic info we get has to come through Ahsoka or The Mandalorian, potentially that animated show that I don't think many people have watched, Resistance, I think maybe is what it's called. So yeah, it probably would have carried a little bit more weight when you blew up an entire New Republic, if anyone even knew or cared about what the New Republic was. So yeah, I think you probably get some of the politics in with it, and everyone's like, oh, no, politics. We don't want that from, the prequel trilogy where it was a little politic heavy. But I think understanding what was going on would have certainly been nice there. So that's a good question. Next, what if Phasma fought Finn on Takodana, so at Maz's castle? If that fight happens early on in that movie versus not Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, Finn had a lightsaber in episode 7. So I want to say her staff, is it made of Beskar? Maybe? I mean, it's a cool staff. She fights a lot of stuff with it. So maybe it's Beskar and it could fight against a lightsaber. I suppose that's probably the case. Let me know in the comments if her staff is Beskar. I'm sure it probably is, but definitely would have been cool. Finn, I think, I'm just going to say Finn with Luke's lightsaber probably wins that battle. If nothing else, they're not as outnumbered there. Like, there are some good guys there versus on that ship in The Last Jedi. It's just like Finn and Rose versus the world. Finn still manages to win that one. So, I mean, who's to say he's not going to win if he's got a lightsaber? So, yeah, he takes her out there and they don't have to put her in a trash compactor for her to come back in another movie. I don't know. These plot holes show up pretty frequently, but I think Finn wins that battle. And now, last question from Giorgio. And I do like this one. I've thought about this one before. I thought about this as the movie came out. But what if Ben Solo survives in The Rise of Skywalker and goes back with Rey? So I do think that's an interesting question. I think it's pretty similar to the question we answered last week, which is what if Darth Vader survived Return of the Jedi as Anakin Skywalker? There's a couple things you got to balance there. The big obvious thing you got to balance is, I mean, he still did a lot of bad things, so he still has to answer for those bad things that he did as Kylo Ren. I have a hard time separating those things. He still did a horrible, heinous acts. Probably potentially guilty with blowing up all those planets, right? Like complicit at a minimum. So you still got to deal with that. So does he go to New Republic jail? Because they've got to make a New Republic at this point, which is kind of comical, but that's where they're at. So does he go to that jail once they figure that out? War criminal. What do they do with war criminals? Maybe he's executed. I don't know. So you got that. Two, maybe him and Rey just kind of go on the run, maybe like not on the run, but they don't hang around and they go do force user things or whatever. I don't know. Raylo happens, I guess, if you're into that kind of a thing. That's one way to get around it. Or two, do people just separate Kylo Ren from Ben Solo? Do they be like, yeah, he was a different person? I don't know. Seems kind of hard to do that. But I think when you have these redemption arcs and you have these really bad guys turning good at the end, I think killing off the character kind of is what has to happen so you don't have to reconcile all those bad things. So I'm actually really okay with Kylo Ren, Ben Solo not making it out of The Rise of Skywalker. Now, the scene is atrocious at the end of the movie, and in my opinion. If you like it, more power to you. But the scene is atrocious where he, smiles, kisses her, and falls over dead. They could have done that a lot better. I mean, if Palpatine's going to get you, it could be a lot cooler than that. But I don't know. What do you do? That's what happened. But I'm okay with Ben Solo not surviving episode 9. But if he did, I think he either has to go to jail or either just kind of disappear out into the galaxy. 3 more questions on YouTube, all from Skywalker Academy. Thank you for these questions, and I'm really excited about the last one. So hang out a few more minutes. It's a pretty cool question. But first question, what if Kylo Ren never turned to the dark side? So none of this ever happens, probably. I mean, the Emperor, I assume, would find someone else to try to manipulate and turn, but Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy probably keeps on going, and there's a new Jedi Order. So, if there's a new Jedi Order, the New Republic keeps existing, you got those checks and balances. So, if First Order starts to come up, this new Jedi Order probably fights whatever is going on in the First Order. Now, Palpatine's taken out one Jedi Order. Why couldn't he take out another? I mean, I suppose he could, but I just think we don't get that far, right? So if we have this whole Jedi Order versus the First Order and the New Republic's on the side of the Jedi Order, I think it's a lot quicker battle. So that's a good question. I do like it, though. Like, we see a completely different trilogy. You have just a lot of different stuff happening. That would have been good. So next up, so these questions are going to be very similar-ish. They're going to be heir to the Empire-ish. So what if Rey was Luke's daughter? That's interesting for sure, right? What if there's like Mara Jade and then, you bring that character in and then you have Rey being the daughter of the two. And like when she's handing that saber to Luke at the end of episode 7, what kind of reveal would that be if he's like, how did you get here? And you're here with my lightsaber. That's really cool. You could have episode 7 go the same way, and it would keep playing up with that whole deal where Maz asks Han, who's the girl, and Han kind of leans in to tell her, and then you have Kylo Ren, and he's mad when they say that the plans are with a girl, and he's like, what girl? Like, he knows something, right? Like, he knows there was some girl on Jakku. So, I think that's interesting, and I will always believe in some shape, form, or capacity that J.J. Abrams, I don't know if he knew what his plans were with Rey for sure. Like Daisy Ridley says there was a lot floated around. So he certainly had some ideas of what was going on with Rey. And so I like how it was left that way in The Force Awakens. And if somehow she was Luke Skywalker's daughter, then it just really builds up on that final scene. And then you probably pick up in episode 8, and you don't have the stupid Luke Skywalker throwing a saber scene. Not that Luke can't be like hurt or have trauma and have issues and leave. That's completely fine. Like that's a real world character type thing. But the throwing the lightsaber was probably a little much starting off the movie there. So yeah, definitely would be interested in that story for sure. Would be interested to see how they reveal it and then where the story kind of moves from there. Like how are they going to get us to the point to where we understand that it's his daughter? There's a lot there. I think that would be a very interesting thing to see. I would give that the seal of approval. So now for the last question. Thanks for hanging in this far. And this is such a good question. So what if Kylo Ren and Rey were siblings? I love the idea. So I love the idea of one sibling falling to the dark side, one's on the light side, and you build up this whole trilogy around these two siblings on these separate paths, and eventually, at the very end, they have to meet, and something's got to give. You could even have them fighting on the wreckage of the second Death Star. You could figure out a way to make that work. That's fine with me. But if that whole sequel trilogy story, let's say they're Leia's kids, that would be cool. Let's say they're Luke's kids. However you want to play that out. 2 Skywalkers embodying the light and the dark together, like the whole thing built around them, the grandchildren, as it should have been from the get-go, and watching how, this one embodies all of Darth Vader and the other embodies all of Anakin Skywalker, and then Luke and Leia and Han having to deal with all of that, and the galaxy, I guess, really having to deal with all of that. That would be a good story. People would have loved that. Now, you can kind of even draw some influence from like the Legends books. If you go back and read some of those 90s Star Wars books, there's some similarities there. Gosh, that would just be so awesome to see on screen, though. I mean, it can take its tragic turn still. You can find ways if you just have to kill off all the original trilogy characters, you can even do that. I think you for sure bring Anakin Skywalker into this to try to pull the dark side on into the light. Probably Anakin talking to the light side person as well, explaining like, hey, this is how this could happen. So this is how you can redeem Kylo Ren. And then you probably have Luke playing in as well, explaining how he redeemed Darth Vader. I just think you could tie the prequels and the original trilogy and the sequels all together, and you could just see this big Skywalker family drama finally playing up at the end. And that's a major missed opportunity for the sequel trilogy. Now, if you love the sequel trilogy, I love that for you. There's a lot of the sequel trilogy that I do like. There's also a lot that I don't necessarily like either. So, I mean, again, no movie is perfect, right? Like, I'm sure there's probably some perfect movie, but all the Star Wars movies have their own issues. But the sequels really suffer from a lack of planning, and the story's just kind of all over the place. We've got directors going different ways each movie. So having something like this, like, okay, Rey and Kylo Ren, they're siblings, light, dark. We got to kind of bring this story to a head with the two of them fighting at the end, and you're building for 9 hours, right? 6 hours, whatever, 3 movies towards that. That would be so good. Would have been probably a lot better than what we got, but it's not what we got. So if you're a sequel fan, keep enjoying the sequels. If you're not a sequels fan, you don't have to watch it. You also, we don't have to be super negative about it either. But I think today it was just fun to kind of talk about them, talk about the what ifs, where it could have gone. So yeah, that was the episode. Thank you everyone for submitting questions. That was a lot of questions to run through in a pretty short amount of time. So next week, Kevin will be back and we will just be talking what's coming next in Star Wars. We've got a video game, we've got Skeleton Crew, we've got the Mandalorian movie, some info to talk about that. We've got Andor coming up next year. So there's a lot of Star Wars to talk about. So just a little bit of a roundup of all the Star Wars news we've had lately. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.